Very warm welcome to this online talk, Recognizing Talent, Career Perspectives of At-Risk Scholars in Finland. I'm Sini Piippo. I'm from the Finnish National Agency for Education, EDUFI. And this event is part of Career Advancement for Refugee Researchers in Europe CARE project, which is supporting the labour market integration of displaced scholars in 10 European countries that you can see here on the map. CARE project is Horizon 2020, Science for Refugees project, and is run by a consortium of Academic Cooperation Association ACA, German Academic Exchange Service DAAD, and us, EDUFI, Finnish National Agency for Education. And this online talk focusing on Finland is organized in cooperation with the Scholars at Risk Finland section. This event is part of a series of 11 online talks organized by the CARE project, and you will hear very soon on the main findings of the focus group discussions with displaced researchers, as well as the employer survey conducted by the project. After going through the results of the project, we have these three excellent speakers sharing their perspectives to the topic and discussing the situation in Finland. I will introduce these speakers a little bit later in more detail. We hope that this event contributes to enhancing the support in Finland for displaced scholars by reaching and involving more stakeholders to the activities and broadening our understanding and recognition of skills and competence. So we are very happy that we have participants joining us now representing such diverse organizations and backgrounds, and we are very much looking forward to having your active participation in this event. As a technical remark, you can participate in the discussions by sharing your questions and comments via the chat. We will take one or two questions after each presentation, and we have also reserved ample time at the end of the event for these discussions. But please keep your mic muted during the event. Thank you. And this event will be recorded and will be available on the project website. Now my colleagues Outi Tomperi and Saara Paavilainen, also from EDUFI, will introduce you to the main findings and recommendations of the CARE project.
So the aim of the focus discussions was to map the needs, interests, challenges and experiences of researchers with refugee background who are navigating the research labour market in 10 different European countries. And in the CARE project, we understand the term researcher with refugee background widely, including displaced scholars, scholars from crisis areas, and researchers under international protection. In total, there were 54 participants in the focus groups, and they represented 19 different countries of origin, with the majority of participants from Turkey and Syria. And the focus group participants were at different stages of their research careers, and they rather evenly represented the three target research profiles, which were from first stage researchers writing their doctoral thesis up to recognized and established researchers. Many of the issues and themes raised by the researchers were common across the 10 European countries, and here are 4 main messages from the focus group discussions. The target group should first and foremost be seen as researchers in their field and for their merit, and not as refugees. Although there is a clear need for tailored and targeted support, this should not diminish their profile as researchers. Secondly, it is important to make the diversity of the research community visible, and at the same time to change and diversify the image of refugees so that it is understood that refugees can also be highly skilled researchers. And in many countries, the focus is on attracting and recruiting highly skilled workforce from abroad, but European countries should acknowledge the expertise among persons already living in their countries in order not to lose any human potential. Thirdly, it is important to be mindful and to remember that not everyone has a similar academic background, nor do they follow the same career paths. And often the situation would ameliorate already significantly by remembering the diversity of the scholars in general and paying attention to accessibility and inclusion. And this should also be done by critically reviewing the recruitment processes. Fourthly, there is a clearly identified need for targeted support for researchers with refugee background, which should be recognized and intensified throughout Europe. And there are already many initiatives and support programs, but the target group is not always aware of them. So therefore, intensifying the promotion and visibility of existing initiatives is needed, as well as creating new strategies in order to better reach out to the target group. And when it comes to the colleagues who have not yet finalized their PhD, they are currently excluded from many existing support programs, and this issue needs to be addressed. And more specifically, there is also a recommendation to introduce an EU-wide support program for at-risk academics to ensure availability in all European countries. And this recommendation we will, of course, also make when organizing the EU-level online talk on Friday, the 20th of November, and we will send you all an invitation to this event. These were just some of the key findings of the focus group discussions, and there are, of course, many other important observations and recommendations. And in case you're interested in the topic, we recommend you to browse through the focus group report and read more. And now my colleague Sara will continue, and she will share with you the main results of the employer survey.
So I will now elaborate about employers' view on this topic. So in this project, we conducted an employer survey with an objective to collect relevant information on the labor market conditions and requirements for at-risk scholars in the 10 target countries. And this survey was targeted for those organizations and companies who employ researchers, and for those organizations or employers who have previous experiences on employing at-risk scholars, as well as those who do not have previous experiences yet. We also targeted organizations with expertise on the research labor market and or on the opportunities for researchers with refugee background. All in all, we had 104 respondents from the 10 countries. And in terms of positions, most of the participants represented management and HR services, and the organizations responding to the survey were mostly universities, and there were only a small number of companies responding to the survey. We think that this can be seen to mirror the visibility and awareness of the need of support activities for this target group, especially in the academic sector. Here we have collected some of the main messages concerning the employer survey and its results. And of course, the full report includes plenty of other results and recommendations, so we highly encourage you to check that report as well for more information. But first of all, one of the main messages raised by the respondents was that they do not differ or recognize researchers with refugee background as a separate group. So this can be seen as a positive factor, of course, as the researchers are evaluated on equal basis with others based on their achievements and skills, not on their background. But on the other hand, this could lead to a situation where the needs for the targeted support and the specific challenges the researchers of this group encounter can be then overlooked. Strongly connected with this finding is the second message raised from the survey. So the recruitment is always based on professional skills. The respondents emphasized that professional skills and qualifications are the most important aspects when hiring employees, and organizations generally hire the best applicant despite of his or her background. So the immigration status of the researchers is not relevant in the hiring process at all. However, this message partly contradicts with the experiences at-risk scholars have faced in their recruitment processes in Europe. So clearly there is a need to review these recruitment processes more critically. Then thirdly, according to the survey, the targeted support measures seem to be in a very central role. Most of the scholars indicated in this survey were hired through intermediary body, which in most cases was a funding program targeting scholars with refugee background in particular. So there is a strong need from both employers and researchers towards targeted support measures at European level. Then finally, the fourth message is that private sector could have more significant role as an employer for the target group. As these R&D companies do researchers and need researchers, and then again researchers need positions, companies could be more significant employer than they now are. And it would be recommended to increase awareness in the private sector towards the topic, and also to create links between companies and researchers, and intensifying, for example, cooperation with companies in the existing support programs for at-risk scholars to improve, again, the employment opportunities. Yes, but this is about employer survey, and I will now give floor back to Sini.
So these were the main messages and recommendations from our two reports, and as Sara and Outi already mentioned, we warmly recommend for you to go to the website and have a look and read the full reports. But now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speakers. It's Ali Ali, PhD student in gender, culture and society at the University of Helsinki, and Magdalena Kmak, professor of public international law, specialized in migration and minority research from Åbo Akademi University. So they will have a joint presentation with a specific focus on the perspective of doctoral students at risk. So the floor is yours, and I believe that Magdalena, you will start first.
I will give this presentation, as Sini mentioned, together with my colleague Ali. The main focus of my talk is the support for doctoral students at risk. And in this presentation, I will first focus very briefly on the historical accounts of the support for scholars in exile or at risk, focusing on such support provided at the American universities to scholars from the Nazi Germany. I will in particular underline the role of scientific and national community in supporting the scholars and juxtapose it with the system of support created by various institutions and foundations. In particular, I will show how scholars were classified for receiving support to the later discussed matter of support for doctoral students. In this presentation, I will use concepts such as émigré, exiled, refugee, or at-risk scholar, mindful, however, about the symbolically charged meaning and excessive generalization they produce. So, as Peter Berkey underlines in A Social History of Knowledge, the movement of scholars across borders has been significant, starting already from the exodus of Greek scholars from Byzantium to Italy in the 15th century. This can be said in particular about the exodus of Jewish and German-speaking refugees from the Nazi Germany. and according to the survey list of displaced German scholars compiled by the Emergency Association of German Scholars in Exile, together with the London Academic Council, as much as 2,000 German scholars lost their position in the 1930s. To be sure, the experience of scholars from Germany is one of many in the 20th century, that include also Italian, French, Russian, or Polish, to just name a few. There have been a number of support networks providing assistance to scholars. From the Nazi Germany, and the various rescue operations and assistance agencies in Europe and outside supported refugees to a very significant extent. This includes League of Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Committee of Experts for Academic and Kindred Refugees from Germany, already mentioned Emergency Association of German Scholars in Exiles, and just many others that you can see on the slides from such countries as England, France, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, or Turkey. In the USA, Abraham Flexner established in 1930s the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, and Alvin Johnson established in 1933 the University in Exile with the New School for Social Research. Despite such extensive support, the emigration of the scholars from the Nazi Germany has been often met with mixed reception in receiving countries. In the USA, many believed that the country should quickly reach and invite the best scholars to own universities, as the German education system was in a very high esteem. As Walter Cook, director of the Institute of Fine Arts in New York, has said, "Hitler is my best friend. He shakes the tree and I collect the apples." This approach clashed, however, with isolationism and limits imposed on immigration, anti-Semitism, and difficult economic situation at the universities in results of Great Depression. These developments resulted in the fact that often the only distinguished scholars would receive direct or efficient support. As an example, you can see the classification of scholars to be provided support by the Rockefeller Foundation, Director Alan Gregg. So you can see that the scholars to be aided have been divided in a couple of classes. And class 1 was distinguished scholars of established reputation. Class 2, any brilliant younger scholars of proved ability. And young men of promise, class 3, was at the same time excluded from the protection. In addition, even the scholarly excellence would often not be enough, which underlines the importance of contacts and established communities. In practice, those who had been in the USA on a visit before had the best chance to receive an academic position. In addition, personal connections with those already in America who could provide some support or reference letters was very helpful. In practice, those scholars with established professional or family contacts were subjected to less strict selection processes. And this brings me to the main question of this talk, the support for doctoral and younger students. In the USA that I studied in more detailed manner, young scholars were in most difficult situation. First of all, because most of the assistance, as you have seen already in the earlier quote, was directed to established scholars. And second, because of the fear of infringing professional chances of young American scholars, in particular in the times of Great Depression. Therefore, the assistance was provided only to scholars above 30 years old. Only the Oberlander Trust did not follow this rule and gave small grants for younger emigres. Many younger and less established scholars with PhD degrees often returned to the universities to obtain undergraduate degrees that would later allow them to find work at the universities of elsewhere. Of course, one should not forget obvious differences in the status of German scholars and working condition in the academia in the 1930s USA and the situation that we deal with currently. Nevertheless, one can clearly see similarities in the structure and conditions of support offered. This brings me to the main point of this presentation, which is the support for younger scholars and doctoral students. In particular, I would like to raise two interlinked issues. First is the lack of targeted financial support to doctoral students at risk, combined with the general rules regulating the legal status. And two, the problematic relationship between the categories of academic and the refugee or a scholar at risk. Starting with the first point, most of the targeted support offered to scholars at risk in Finland focuses on academic with doctorates. This can be seen, for instance, in the conditions for support provided by the Scholar Rescue Fund in Finland. And even though the grants are targeted to scholars from conflict regions in the early stages of the academic career, this encompasses only recent PhD graduates or scholars with limited academic experience after graduation. So doctoral students can, however, apply for general funding, such as EDUFI fellowship, but they need to compete with other doctoral students who are not at risk. This leads me to the second related issue, that of the legal status, and that refers to the conditions for providing support to refugee scholars in general. And taking into consideration that the research funding to scholars at risk is often provided for short periods of time, such as sometimes 6 months or 1 year, scholars seek support in many countries. However, if such a scholar is a refugee or is undergoing the procedure for determination of the refugee status, it is very difficult for them to obtain residence permit based on research. For instance, according to instructions provided by the Finnish Immigration Service, the research-based residence permit in Finland cannot be granted if the person has applied for refugee status in Finland or has received a refugee status in an EU country. These rules are not only concerning Finland, however, and they are based on the EU directive on the conditions of entry and residence of third country nationals for the purposes of research, studies, training, and so on and so forth. And this leads me to the third observation, that of the problematic relationship between categories of an academic and a refugee that scholars at risk themselves talk or write about. Such problematic relationship is visible in the legal regulations I just discussed. To put it simply, it is very difficult to be both an academic and a refugee. This concerns not only legal status, but also the scholarly credibility or scholarly identity, as some scholars mention. For instance, 2 younger scholars are interviewed as part of my small research among displaced scholars at risk, mostly legal scholars, underline that the label of scholar at risk may sometimes negatively impact future academic career. Being labeled as SAR scholar may take away academic credibility when scholars are considered as not good enough and receiving funding only because they are at risk, but not because their research is good. Some solutions to that would be, as other scholars I interviewed underlined, to make sure that the invited scholar fits with their area of research to the department or the project they are invited to, or that the skills are fully utilized and they are invited to take part in many number of scholarly activities. And these all points lead me to the conclusion that there is a need for, first of all, more funding, in particular to doctoral students, as we've seen that such funding hasn't been very much provided in history and also currently. However, such funding needs to be based on carefully considered conditions that at the same time are carefully planned and do not deprive scholars of academic credibility. And I think these conclusions of mine also seem to mirror the results of survey that Sara and Outi presented just a few minutes ago. But I think I will stop here and then give the floor to my colleague, Ali.
So thank you for the short presentations that they kind of very much relate to what I'm going to say. It's kind of putting flesh and embodied experience on what you have been mentioning. So yeah, the first presentation spoke about employment and professional skills, and the second one was speaking about community, mostly Magda focused on the academic community. And I want to speak about community and bureaucracy, but when they manifest in a more when they come with some existential threat to scholars who are at risk. First, I wanted to choose this map of Europe to show how it looks like for somebody who has no problems or bureaucratic problems with borders. This is how Europe looks, and you can move around these communities, and they are they look like conglomerations of cities, and where opportunities can be found academically and socially. But then when you put borders into view, and when you put this overlaying borders, a political map of Europe, you start to think about how people are differently affected by that. And for a person who comes to a foreign Europe in the beginning as a young scholar or a young student, let's say, it's hard to recognize what's happening. I mean, it takes time for people to develop their academic state of mind, academic skills, and academic visions too. And sometimes the country of where, for example, where I started to study was not where I found my opportunity. I studied, for example, in Central Europe, and then I started to realize that my opportunities lie somewhere in Sweden, maybe, or that's what as an example. But at the same time, there is this kind of having to balance between opportunity and community when it is the community that is holding you as a safety net, or offers a safety net for a migrant whose need for community. I think that would be more crucial than people who are natives, or people who don't have issues with borders, at least. So with this waxing awareness of what's happening in the academic world, you see the waning time. It's kind of, you start to realize that when you start to learn the rules of the game, so to speak, you start to be demanded or kind of questioned for achievements and community, that what you have established in the academic community. And also with that comes the growing realization that it's not about the country of encounter, the country of first access or first settlement in Europe. It's mostly about realizing also that there are safer environments to be in as a migrant too. The point is having to balance all of this, the community and the bureaucracy and the desirability to what you have achieved with each other. And they, like, when the point is to secure all of this I'm sure that all scholars have these problems, but applying for funds for a scholar who has, for example, when I came to Finland, I had 7 months contract, and my PhD was 4 years, a 4-year program. So this balancing and making ends meet was very crucial and kind of intimidating. It was through community and not the academic community that I was helped to move to Finland and to find opportunities mostly. With that comes, like, I found myself kind of lucky. I couldn't describe it either way. Otherwise, I mean, there must be talent and credibility, and I don't deny that, and it would be a suicidal move to do that here. But it was so much about community, a community that I studied with in Sweden that helped me find opportunities here, and I wouldn't say that I was the acrobatic mover here. speaking about academic community, I would say that it takes sometimes so many calculations about time and meaning and the very questioning the very purpose of, like, if I stay here for 6 months and then I'm not even allowed to stay on the territory of a country, when it's not only about finding fundings only, it's about losing the right to stay on the territory, and also losing the community that is even outside Akademi. And so all of this together makes it more of a task to do, I would say. Then I'm not differentiating between scholars at risk and scholars who are not at risk. I know that all scholars are at risk, but I'm trying to put some flesh and embodied experience on what's really happening when losing funding or not finding funding doesn't only mean that you can wait or you have to give up your study, but also your community and your life in this place, especially if you imagine going back to a place where you chose not to establish community, neither academic nor like somewhere else in Europe, according whether to the Dublin Convention or whether according to just where you managed to establish yourself in the beginning. That was everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magdalena and Ali, raising these historical and legal perspectives and also sharing these extremely relevant experiences. And as you pointed out, these are fully in line and very much linked to the findings of our two reports as well. So thank you so much. So I would just like to remind the participants that you can send your comments and questions by the chat option. If you're not ready with your questions yet, we can save them for later. And now move to our next speaker, Professor Martin Cloonan. So we will hear more on the activities taken by the Finnish higher education community from Martin Cloonan, director of the Turku Institute for Advanced Studies, TIAS, currently the chair of Scholars at Risk Finland section for 20 and 21 for these years. So please, Martin, the floor is yours.
So yes, I'll say a little bit about Scholars at Risk Finland. I'll say a little bit about me, Scholars at Risk Finland, and our plans, and then say a little bit about the report. So yes, I'm Martin Cloonan. I am director of the Turku Institute for Advanced Studies in the University of Turku. I was formerly professor of popular music politics at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. I do work on the music industries. My kind of main experience, which might be relevant for today, was I chaired an organisation called Free Muse, an NGO supporting freedom of musical expression for its first 20 years. And then I became the chair of Scholars at Risk Finland for 2020 and 2021. I am a director of an Institute for Advanced Studies, and Magda mentioned the kind of tradition of institutes for advanced studies supporting academic freedom in certain ways, at least going back to the 1930s in Princeton. But it does raise. She also raised a very pertinent question of, institutes for advanced studies are supporting academic freedom, but we're also quite elitist as well. So we recruit in a quite elitist way. So there's a tension there at least. Anyway. In terms of a little bit of an overview of Scholars at Risk, most of you will be familiar with this, I guess. It was established in 1999, currently based in New York, an institute of a network of over 500 universities, which across the globe, undertaking a range of advocacy and awareness raising work around issues of academic freedom. It does a number of things, such as helping potential host institutions identify suitable scholars and then recruit them. It has no funding in and of itself, but there is some. It does work with the Scholar Rescue Fund funded by the International Institute for Education and sometimes gets funding via there. In terms of Scholars at Risk in Finland, it's a fairly new organisation established in 2017 with administrative support for the first couple of years provided by EDUFI. We've now moved into our second phase, 2020 to 21. We do hold regular section meetings. We hold some events and attend other events, such as this one. We have some of the institutions in Finland are hosting scholars, some of our members, so Aalto, Åbo Akademi, Helsinki, Tampere, Turku, have all hosted scholars or are currently hosting scholars. We also link with SAR International and SAR Europe, including the INSPIRE project at Maynooth University, which is looking at coordinating scholars at risk activity across Europe. We did produce, we had some funding to produce a local guide to hosting, which was done at Turku, but was done for all members, and that's available to our members, and we're trying to update it as we learn best practice about hosting scholars. But I think it's fair to say that Scholars at Risk Finland is still developing and moving from being established towards kind of greater activity. In terms of our plans over the next couple of years, we've agreed our strategy back in March. We want to build on the work that was done at Turku, and importantly, that was based on the experiences of scholars and talking to the scholars that have been present in Finland and trying to learn from some of their experience. We do meet regularly. We get reports from each of our members at those meetings. We had a meeting last September. We hope to hold the first Scholars at Risk Finland Day on the 17th of March next year in Turku, and then we'll review how that goes and try to develop more policies. We're undertaking some advocacy work with student unions. We're trying to set up a speaker series as well, and we're trying to engage all the Finnish universities in this. Not all of them are members at the moment. Importantly, not all members of the Scholars at Risk Finland host scholars, but they do hold events and so on. Most of them are active in one way or another, and that might include, awareness raising, bias at things as trying to bring issues of academic freedom and scholars at risk into teaching, and we're monitoring that as well at the moment. We've got some outreach activities planned for this year and next. We will try and invite researchers interested in scholars and risk to come to Finland, conditions allowing, of course. We're always exploring further funding opportunities. We're trying to develop more cooperation across the Nordic region and continuing to work with SAR International. And we're also looking beyond academia. I was interested in the employers report because we want to talk to organisations such as Business Finland, the various chambers of commerce, trade unions, and so on, and of course the CARE project. And we're also looking at collaborating with artists at risk as well. So a kind of summary of Scholars at Risk Finland so far. We've established ourselves. We're moving more into more activities. We've got plans for the next couple of years. We're raising awareness and supporting members hosting and other SAR activities. And I would say to people, one of the things I think that's been very useful in Turku, at least, is to try and get Scholars at Risk mentioned in university policy documents. So there was at least that commitment at institutional level to supporting Scholars at Risk. We are still working, of course, with international Scholars at Risk and looking to develop links beyond higher education. In terms of the reports today, found them both very interesting. Would thank colleagues for the chance to talk about them and for the invite today. I think there were definitely implications for Scholars at Risk Finland coming out of those reports. I think we need to find ways for scholars within Finland to talk to one another and share their experiences, obviously subject to prevailing conditions. Definitely need to find ways to support networking. And a quote from the report there, crucial to the continuity of the academic career is networking. And when you're trying to establish yourself in a country, the chances to networking might be difficult, so we need to think about that. We certainly need to produce guides to funding for our scholars as well. The Finnish funding landscape can be quite daunting when you first come here, I've found. So we need to develop some work on that. And certainly to develop mentoring, I think, to help guide our colleagues as well. And certainly I want to discuss the reports, the CARE reports at our next Scholars at Risk Finland meeting. We will continue to work with EDUFI and CARE, of course. We want to ensure that Scholars at Risk is kept on high on the political agendas during these difficult times. And I also think, one of the issues that comes up is a lot of these positions are very short term. Ali mentions 7 months or something like that. So there is a real need to look to provide longer term solutions for scholars at risk. But I would probably end where we started, which is really to treat scholars as scholars first and foremost, and not as refugees or anything else, but primarily as colleagues. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Martin, for this presentation on the activities of SAR Finland, and we are definitely very grateful for having this very active network of Finnish higher education institutions working with us as EDUFI and CARE project on these issues. So thank you so much for raising these points. And now, actually, we have now heard from our speakers and their perspectives and the findings and recommendations from our projects, and the time that we have together, we can now start the discussions. So you can send your questions and comments via the chat. In case you have a comment that you would like to comment with your mic on, that could be also an option. So that in that case you can raise your hand, and we will invite you to join the discussion. But while you are writing your questions and comments to the chat, we have some questions for the speakers. I was thinking, Martin, you raised some action points for the Finnish higher education community, but another question would be that can we identify how to facilitate more connections between the private sector and the researchers and this target group, and can we come up with new approaches and initiatives? How do you see this point?
Yeah, thank you very much. An easy question to start off with, but I do think that yes, we need to talk to business organisations and chambers of commerce, and you and I are speaking at Talent Boost Turku in a couple of weeks' time to try and do some of that work. Obviously, the employer survey that you've done has shown how difficult this can be, and I guess that, there's a real tension here, and I think we have to face this. If we're talking to employers outside of academia, does that diminish us as scholars in some way? We've already said we want to recognise our colleagues as primarily being scholars, but are we kind of pushing them out their door and saying, go and work outside academia as well, when particularly at the moment everybody's being encouraged to retrain and so on. But I do think that the kind of serious point I would draw out of this is that the people that are coming are assets for Finland, and they're assets for the public sector, and they're assets for the private sector as well. So we need to get that message across to in all fields. So and opening up more lines of communication. Yeah, I don't have a magic wand, of course, but I'm very well aware of the need to do that. I would also say, that Scholars at Risk Finland is not a big organisation. It's people meeting, 2 or 3 times a year to try and push forward a few agendas. So, we need to think about our priorities, but certainly talking out to organisations outside of higher education, very, very important.
Thank you so much, Martin, and couldn't agree more on getting this message through. I don't see any additional questions at the moment, but for Ali and Magdalena, I would like to ask you. You discussed the doctoral students at risk and their perspective and maybe their support that is currently lacking. And as arriving to a new country and the challenges linked to that. So can we identify more initiatives on how to support adjusting to a new academic culture and networking, for example? Would you have more recommendations on that?
I don't know, maybe I could start, if that's okay, Ali.
Sure.
I think this is a very important question. When I come back to the interviews I conducted with couples of scholars at risk on different level of academic career, and I talk with some doctoral students, I talk with people who have done PhDs already, I think they all underline that also what Martin said. First of all, make the person feel like a scholar. So that's what comes from the persons themselves. And also what you've mentioned by providing the summary of the surveys, also recognize the individual situation of the person. And people come with different background, they come with different academic experiences. Many scholars have already done some research abroad, but many haven't done it before. So for instance, if we think about the very concrete measures that have been discussed also when I talk with different people providing support to scholars at risk, even something like translating person's publication into English. So those publications can be actually available then when the person applies for funding, because of course many people have published in their national languages and those publications are not available, and we don't know the kind of academic expertise of the person. So those issues, I think it's very important to look into the individual circumstances and then create community. That's what Ali mentioned, I think.
And Ali, would you like to add, comment?
I don't think I can add any more to Magda and sorry, I forgot the name of the other speaker because I work with Magda. But I don't think I can add anything other than the other speakers have spoken about. But I would say that maybe other than like what scholarship is this, what counts as scholarship, what kind of knowledge matters, and I mean, in a world where we are kind of trying to do our best to survive, whether economically, environmentally, or politically, we all have this vulnerability, and maybe foregrounding knowledge that comes from vulnerability, because it's valuable for survival in itself. I know it's not like a magic wand or a magic idea, as Martin said, but yeah, but kind of I think we need also to work on what knowledge and what knowledge is kind of deserve to be heard, and yeah, more inclusivity, so to speak, and to put it more simply.
Yes, thank you so much, and maybe linking your comments to the findings of our reports. So thinking of intensifying the targeted support, also critically looking through the criteria of different support programs, as well as being mindful on the different academic backgrounds and making the information available. Those are linked to your comments, and we have one comment or question in the chat. So Sahar is commenting that integration is very important for Scholar. My question is, there best ways to find a connection between integration process and market needs? So maybe this is also a question concerning the balance between these different aspects. So any of our three speakers, would you like to react to Sahar's comment?
Well, I think it's very important. I think this is, yes, integration and connection of the skills to the market needs is very important. But at the same time, the academic or research also is going its own ways, right? So it's not always possible to link your research with the needs of the market. And I think this is also a conundrum, but this is also the way how academic research goes. So perhaps it would be important to find a community inside and outside of the academia. I think that perhaps would be something, and it would be also a task for universities and for scholars or for departments hosting scholars at risk, perhaps to just provide not only scholarly support, but also some other information, and maybe also have a access to the good information, what is available in particular country. I'm not sure if that really answers the questions, but that's just what quickly comes to my mind.
Thank you, Magdalena. And Martin, you have a comment.
Yeah, I would say for me, this comes back to the question of short-termism of some of the contracts and things like that. I mean, as an individual, if your tendency to integrate, it seems to me, would be likely to be longer if you think you're going to be somewhere for 4 or 5 years. If you think you're only going to be somewhere for 6 months and then you may be in another country, you may not, feel that, put all your emphasis into integration. So I think that what we need in the longer term is longer term positions and kind of role models to emerge. That that our current colleagues who've come through this system can think, oh, in 3 or 4 years' time, I can be like this person. I can have a career in this country, and that's the sort of. So these are very long term things, I think.
Yes, and concerning the long term perspectives, there is a further comment in the chat on the plan for the scholar with requirements of the market and to find a stable solution. So I think that this comment links directly to the discussion that we just had. Or would any of the speakers have further comments? If you see yes, Ali, go ahead, please.
I'm sure that so many disagree with me, but I think it's paradoxical to speak about market and when you speak about issues of vulnerability, and not only for scholars at risk, but the market. I don't think that the market prioritizes like community and communal commons. I would say that the answer is commons and kind of buffering against the market, not or that's maybe the way of speaking to the market. If market is a crucial force anyway, I would say that kind of this balance is kind of challenging, but not to go completely into this kind of paradigm of market and competition, because it always falls into kind of violent normativity.
And Magda, go ahead. You can continue.
Yes, if I could very briefly just comment or maybe add to what Martin just said, that the longer funding opportunities are extremely important, and that could be perhaps possible. And maybe we could think about opportunities in Finland. This is just a suggestion. Perhaps different private foundations could consider also providing funding to scholars at risk, or whether research projects could already plan for including funding for scholars at risks when applying for funding, because then of course it would provide a bit longer support to the people who would, who would fit into the program. At the same time, these people will be much better integrated because they will be also recruited with the research relating to the project itself. So that's perhaps something more kind of long-term thinking on the side of project, on the side of the universities, on the side of different foundations. I think that would be extremely important.
Thank you. Very relevant recommendations that we can hopefully work with. And Martin, go ahead.
Thanks. Just slightly to come back on Ali's comment, I share his concerns about kind of market-driven solutions and so on. But I also do kind of think it's incumbent upon us to look realistically at what the academic job market is like, and to assist colleagues during their time with us to be kind of to make sure they get as much continuing professional development as they can from during their time in our host institutions, so that it's hard to get away from the fact that to an extent as an academic you are in the market as a product, and you are out there competing with other academics for jobs which are extremely rare. So I'm not suggesting that we go all out for market solutions, but I think it's incumbent upon us to be realistic about what the academic job market's like as well. So I share Ali's concerns, but I think we need to kind of think about how we best help colleagues in all this.
Thank you for these discussions, and I don't see additional comments in the chat, and I think that it's slowly time to start wrapping up actually this event. But I would have one final question for all our speakers to kind of summarize the discussions and the presentations that we've had in this event. And the question is, how can we diversify the image of refugees and migrants? And what would be the ways to better recognize the skills of at-risk scholars? If Martin, maybe you can start with this final question.
So you started with an easy question for me and you end with another easy question. Thank you. But I do think that positive examples and positive role models seems, from my experience, to be the sorts of things that you need to have if we can show the contributions that we know our colleagues are making to Finland, and if we can promote that in some way and promote positive images of the whole program and what our colleagues bring when they come to Finland. That seems to me, and also, to show the scholars themselves that there's a future here for them. So I think, role models and good examples and all the publicity we can do around that would be my one magic wand thing.
Thank you so much. Do we continue with Ali, with you?
So that's a very hard question. I couldn't come up with an answer now. But I acknowledge that I kind of misunderstood the questions. That's why I commented on the market in a very aggressive way. But still, I know that the balancing was the question itself. And I would say this balancing between what the market needs and what survival as academics and as academics that are relevant to humanity and to kind of more livable survival of the world. I mean, that's kind of takes also kind of a counterbalance to competition and recognition, I would say, more recognition of diversified knowledge.
And then over to Magdalena.
Thank you. I think I will again come back to my interviews with a couple of scholars, and they pointed at two very important things. First of all, make the person feel like a scholar, utilize the person's academic skills, and at the same time also think very carefully when people are being employed or provided scholarships that they really fit into the department and in the project that they are involved in. And also talk to the scholars at risk themselves. And I think there is a lot of experience, and there is a lot of knowledge and a lot of good suggestions that they themselves can give us what would be the best way of diversifying that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for our excellent speakers for these comments and discussion. And then I'm happy to see that there are more questions coming in the chat. I think that we can continue the discussions, hopefully soon face to face. You're welcome to contact us via email and continue the discussions with colleagues in different events. I would like to just as a wrap up show you that we are continuing with the CARE project. So with CARE project, we are continuing with the European level event on 20th of November, and it will be also taking place online, and you can find all the relevant information, also including the reports and country guides that are coming up, as well as the other online talks on the CARE web page that you can see the link here, and you can contact the CARE email address, and you can find us on Twitter. You are also welcome if you have some discussions concerning specific Finland. You are of course welcome to contact me and Outi and Saara here at EDUFI. So we would like to really warmly thank you for this discussion, and hoping to see you again on the European level event. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much.